now start with lesson number 4 of this seminar, or mini-seminar on the Mahatma Letters. This one deals essentially and fundamentally with theoretical and philosophical questions. This is essentially the part that the Master Moria contributed most effectively. The reason why he was the one contributing on this occasion, on this subject, was because the Master KH had retired temporarily for nearly 3 months in order to receive the 6th major initiation and become a Shohan, as they call it. The word Shohan in Tibetan means Lord. So it is a very high position, of course, a very high degree of development. And he is placed sort of like a head of race, as they call it. Race in the lore of occult science represents currents of energy, which are the ones to which the universe normally manifests. They're called the rays. And they have to do with different aspects of life in general, like leadership, for instance, art, education, religion, and so on. The Master KH is heading the ray of education. He's the sort of right arm of the Lord Maitreya, who is a 7th initiation. The Lord Maitreya is known as a world instructor. That is his main title he has. So he is essentially the person in charge of everything that has to do with the unfoldment of education, intellectual disposition, and so on. The Master KH is his main assistant, so to speak. He's on 6th initiation. That's what it is. Now, because he had to go to receive this initiation, he would be out of circulation, so to speak, for nearly 3 months. So what he did, he asked his brother, the Master Moria, with whom he has a very close relationship, to please take over the correspondence. He said, please don't let my work to go to ruins. If this correspondence with Mr. Sinek is interrupted, most likely all my work will be for nothing. So therefore, please do me a favor and take the correspondence for the time that I will be out, which is going to be about 3 months or so. And then the Master Moria says something that's really touching and reveals his love for his brother, with whom he has been very close. And he says, what was that which I would have denied him, my dear brother, in this moment? My brother, the light of my soul. There's a close relationship, as I said before, between both masters. They work together. The thing about it is Master Moria was the first one who refused to have correspondence with Mr. Sinek when Madame Blavatsky asked him originally, before she got in touch with KH. Categorically, he said no. In this particular case, he did make an exception because of his friendship with Master KH, and also because he realized the importance of the work that KH was doing, and how essential, how useful this correspondence would eventually be. It wasn't only a question of his affection for the Master KH, whom he called his brother, but also because he felt that whatever KH was doing was really particularly useful. So therefore, he went along with it with no problem. I don't think he was very happy about it. Nevertheless, he did comply, and very effectively. In the beginning, his letters were very short, very much to the point, and very dry, if you will. Essentially, however, when he noticed the intensity and the validity of the questions posed by Mr. Sinek, he sort of got enthused about it, and then he started opening up, and his letters became longer, of course, and more, greater deal of explanation and so on. And he tackled something that's very thorny, which is the question of philosophical and theoretical teachings. Among them, cosmogony, which is really a problem. It deals with the question of the doctrine of the cycles. The doctrine of the cycles is perhaps the most complex of all the doctrines that we study in occult science. Specifically in philosophy, some kind of nomenclature has been unfolded in order to be able to communicate the ideas effectively. But is a very difficult doctrine to understand. Apparently, Mr. Sinek was having a great deal of trouble understanding what the master was telling him. The questions were complex and the answers appeared to be even more complex and very difficult to understand. When he complained about the fact that he was having a problem trying to understand, fully understand what he was being told, the master told him, look, I understand that, I understand your perplexity. I think that it's something that would make anybody perplexed because it's simply a very complicated doctrine. But I will tell you one thing. It took me 15 years of continual study in order to begin to understand the doctrine of disciples. Now that is a surprising statement because an adept has a degree of intelligence which is way, way higher than the best mind we can find in this world. This is a perfected human being. As such, their intellect has also been perfected to a considerable extent. If 100 is the figure indicated for normal IQ, well, we can assume easily that the master has over 500, close to 1,000 perhaps. That is what a human being can have, can show when he has reached the point of perfection, when he has gone beyond fifth initiation. So therefore, a person with that degree of intelligence takes 15 years in order to begin to understand a certain doctrine. It's obvious that for us, regular, average human beings, it's going to be very difficult. However, in a general sense, it's a basic concept. It is not something difficult to understand. If we want to get deeper and deeper into the subjective elements of it and the abstract elements in it, then of course it becomes very, very complex. But in the opinion of some of us, it's not that important. The important thing to understand is the basic ideas in terms of how our planet came to be what it is now. And that, I think, is essentially leans on the fact that anything that is physical and therefore dense has to become, has to originate rather, in a subtle way, in a subtle plane. Hence, all things which are physical, what we're told, start as they say, as archetypes or models, whatever you call it, as ideas, ideation. You may take any kind of name to this. In the atomic plane, that is, I like to remind everybody, if you have taken the introductory course, on the fact that there are 7 types of matter in the universe. Fundamentally, the universe has 7 basic types of matter in our level, so to speak, in our universe. There are some very other types of matter, much higher than that, other schemes, so to speak. Our scheme has 7 types of matter. Now, the first 2, which is the divine and the monadic, are not planes of manifestation. Manifestation starts in the 3rd plane, what is known as the atomic, also called nirvanic in some texts. That is where things, that is where archetypes, the models of things, are established, so to speak. And if you want something, if we want to start something in that particular plane, well, it starts at a very subtle, very, very subtle level. This is a plane which is really very, very subtle, pure energy. Gradually, however, that thing has to densify and then become embodic, and then become mental, and then become astral, and eventually become physical. The globe we call the Earth has undergone that process from very subtle into very dense, which is what we have right now. We are in the middle of the scheme though, in the middle of the evolution of the Earth, which is sort of figured out about 2,500 million years of existence. And as far as humanity is concerned, only about 60 million years. That's a little bit more than that, but that's about the size of it. Now, for the planet to become habitable, adequate, we have to go back much more time than that of humanity. We must remember that we already had organic life on the Earth 100 million years ago, when you had dinosaurs all over the place. But even that, before that, way before that, we already had organic life. First, vegetable, essentially, and then, of course, animal. Mankind is a newcomer relatively speaking, this whole thing, because we go back to about 18 million years in sort of the way when the physical body that we inhabit, that we use, became a trunk, extremities, and a head, and in a vertical position. That happened about 18 million years ago, during what we call the Lemurian times, the third root race. Fundamentally, that's what it is. And then the whole process of unfoldment of a human being, getting into the fourth root race, which is the Atlantean, and eventually the one we are in now, which is the fifth root race, which is the Aryan. Well, it's taken, a long amount of time. Especially the Atlantean started about 5 million years ago, and the Aryan, which started now, about 1 million years ago in Central Asia. That's the Caucasian, as they call it. That's the physical aspect. But the whole thing has started, as I said before, at a very, very subtle level. And it's something that has to be understood from the very beginning if we try to get into the doctrine and try to make something out of it. It's not an easy thing to understand if we get too deep into it. It must be understood that whatever we have received in terms of information of this type, dealing with cosmogony or anthropology or whatever, is always limited because we have not been given all the information. Information is a dangerous thing. And we must be reminded that in this world we find very intelligent people, very capable people, but with no ethics, no decency. You give them knowledge and they will use it for selfish purposes, and they can do a lot of damage with it. So the masters, when they give us information along these lines, they are very, very careful. They don't want to make sure that whatever they're giving us is going to benefit us and not do us damage. This is a very important thing to consider that they always have in mind. That got Mr. Hume, which was the other correspondent, in problems with the Master KH, because he resented the fact that some questions that he put forth were not responded. The Master told him, I'm sorry, I am not in a position to respond to this question. And this happened in a few occasions, and this displeased him very much. He couldn't tolerate the idea of being told, no, you cannot have an answer to this question. The Master took pains to explain to him, listen, it's not that I don't want to give you the knowledge. It's that I am not authorized to do so. This correspondence functions on account of certain parameters which have been established by our chiefs. This is what has permitted me to have correspondence with two individuals who are not in the ships, under certain conditions. And among the conditions are those that some of the questions that you may ask cannot be responded because we are not authorized to do so. So be happy with what we're answering, which is plenty. You work with what you have, and you'll reach your own conclusions. Sometimes it's not so necessary to receive the information. You may infer it from your own intuition and from your own intellect as well. You have to keep patient along those lines because that happens only in time. As your consciousness opens up, you will be able to grasp better what we're telling you. And you will get the answer to questions that I'm not answering. But you yourself will find the answers within yourself. Remember that an individual has all the answers of all the questions and all the knowledge and the wisdom of the universe in him. It's only that it's dormant. That's the problem. Unfoldment means the awakening of these powers, of this knowledge, of this wisdom. And that takes time. So don't push things forward, because it takes time. Whatever is at hand, whatever is in the future for humanity, for you personally, and that of Mr. Senat as well, it's going to take time because it's really something wonderful. It's something really spectacular. And to achieve things of that nature takes time. So be patient. Unfortunately, Mr. Hume didn't understand that. And he kept getting, finally got a little bit insolent, and telling the masters that he thought they were selfish because they were not delivering the information that he wanted delivered to him, and so on. So finally, the master told him, if you persist on writing like this, we're going to have to discontinue the correspondence with you. And Mr. Hume continued, so he had to and stopped correspondence with him. However, the correspondence with Mr. Sinet continued because he understood things in a better fashion, and he didn't complain, and he accepted what he had been told along those lines. It was inevitable. It was either that or nothing. So, I mean, common sense sometimes is not the most common of senses, but Mr. Sinet displayed it, and Mr. Hume did not, which is regrettable from the point of view of Mr. Hume, because he lost a magnificent opportunity. Not everybody has had the opportunity since then to receive correspondence on a continual basis with a lot of forgotten information from masters, directly from masters of the White Brotherhood, or the planetary hierarchy. This is not a common thing to happen. It was a very exceptional thing. But Mr. Hume apparently did not have the common sense to understand that what was happening to him was a unique thing, and he should have used it for his own benefit. But he left the society, and he moved away from the whole thing, which was, for him, regrettable. But that was the problem. Now, a moment came, of course, when Mr. Sinet was notified by the main assistant of the Master K.H., the Master de Joel Cool, who is now an adept, that was not an adept at then, that the Master had waken up. And then he sent him a letter, which was received from Mr. Sinet, indicating the fact. In letter 77, which is brief, to the point, and which the Master de Joel Cool says, you know, the Master has waken up, and he's asked me to let you know that he will be ready now to reinitiate the correspondence. To be precise, it says, the Master has awakened and bids me to write.
Completo.
In letter 37, which is the number given to this particular letter from the Master to George Poole, you know, he says, the Master has awakened and bids me to write. And he's indicating in that essentially that the Master K.H. is ready to retake the correspondence, which went on, you know, for nearly 2 more years in this particular case. Now, essentially, in this particular occasion, right before that, both Mr. Sinet and Mr. Hume had proposed the creation of a school of magic that they felt could be undertaken by one of the adepts and would instruct both Mr. Hume and Mr. Sinet into the arts of magic, and so that they could perform phenomena, and this phenomena would convince everybody in Europe that, in fact, this was something very useful for the dissemination of theosophical ideas. They argued that the European mind is not like the Oriental mind. It needs specific proof, things that they can corroborate, things that they can really observe and experience in order to convince them about the value of something. Now, both of them were apparently not very knowledgeable about human nature and the dangers of something of that sort. It's not something that really we can do, this business of using magic to convince people of the validity of a certain philosophical structure. This is not something really, it's nothing that is useful or effective in really delivering information which will influence mankind in a better fashion to help evolution. The Master tells him, listen, we have already indicated to you and we've given you plenty of information. And he says, well, now it's your province to decide which will you have, the highest philosophy or the simple exhibition of occult powers. He added also that he was in no position to teach him any occult powers or anything of that sort. And the idea of a school of magic was flatly rejected not only by the two masters, but also by their chief. Because it is something that we would never, a hotbed of magic is not something that we would ever consider in any way. Now, I think both, especially Mr. Sinet, understood the logic behind the whole thing. And they gave up that idea, and they got serious about trying to learn the ideas that were being furnished through the correspondence. Now, some of the comments of the Master Moria By the time the Mahatma K.H. had returned from his retreat, but the Senate had not yet been informed of this fact. However, before he received a reply to his series of questions, a letter came to him from the High Chair of the Jalkul saying that the Master had awakened and that he was asking him to write to Mr. Senate to inform him. So, this is letter 37, both chronologically and in the book numbering. It begins on page 248 and 245 of the letters. It is a moving letter and will repay some study. In it, the Jalkul commented that the Master K.H. begged Mr. Senate not to be giving up in despair at the note which the Mahatma Moria was be sending him. The more so as Moria Sahib's only hatred in his life is for writing. Not only that, but there was also the question of handwriting. The handwriting that Master Moria had was really not very legible. K.H. had a beautiful handwriting. It was round and clear and to the point. Master Moria's handwriting was a little bit like one of those doctors, which the only ones who can really read those letters are the pharmacists. In this particular case, it was very difficult. He tried to improve on that because Sinet complained bitterly that he couldn't understand what the Master Moria was writing. Okay. And in January 1882, Sinet finally received the notes from the Mahatma M. He understood his admonition. The explanations given were by far the most technical he had yet received. Yeah. The question of the reduction of cycles is a very technical question. It's a very difficult thing to study and to really comprehend. The letter containing these explanations is number 13. Chronological is number 44. Beginning on page 17, all editions of the letters in the document are headed Cosmological Notes and Queries, and Mr. M replied. After Sinet had mastered the explanations given, he was able to use them in a series of articles he was writing for the Theosophist. The Theosophist was a magazine the Philosophical Society had. And later to incorporate them in his second book, Esoteric Buddhism, published in 1883. Now, before studying this letter in detail, the student should have some comprehension of doctrinal cycles, chains, rounds, and globes, etc. Chapters 3 and 4 of Esoteric Buddhism deal with the subject, and extensive information is given in the Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky. The latest, 1978 edition of the latter work contains a new and exhaustive index, and it is relatively easy to identify commentaries on the different concepts. Now, there's something interesting here in terms of what the Master M has to say with respect to cosmology. He says, nothing in nature springs into existence suddenly, all being subjected to the same law of gradual evolution. Realize but once the process of the Maha, or great cycle, of one sphere, and you will have realized them all. One man is born like any other man. One race evolves, develops, and declines like all other races. Nature follows the same groove from the creation of a universe down to that of a mosquito. In studying esoteric cosmogony, keep a spiritual eye on the physiological processes of human birth. Proceed from cause to effect, establishing as you go along analogies between the birth of a man and that of a world. Cosmology is the physiology of the universe spiritualized, for there is but one law. It's an important thing to remember, this whole thing. When we observe the life of a man, when we observe the unfoldment of his consciousness through the several incarnations, we see the same thing all the time. He will live a life of 70, 80 years, more or less. His physical countenance will eventually disappear because he will stop working. The physical body is too dense and has a lot of energy required to move it, to make it work. So therefore, eventually that energy, which is dispensed by the universe to the individual, is not boundless. It has limits. Eventually that body will start to decay. Eventually it will become old, tired, sometimes infirm, and we eventually will stop functioning. And the individual will disincarnate, abandon that body. Now, he will go through the process of the after death, which has been studied very clearly, I think very clearly explained in the basic introductory course that we give. And he will come back into a new incarnation. So what we have is a period of activity, which is his own life, that's his Manvantara, which is the same as the universe, who has a period of activity, except that one is way shorter than the other one. In the life of a man, his Manvantara will last anywhere between 70 and 80 years if he reaches that age, sometimes a little bit more. If he has taken good care of his body, he may reach that point, and if his karma permits also, he may reach that age. And the universe takes millions and millions of years in this manvantaric effort. Subjective effort is inevitable. So it takes a long time. However, when the universe stops and pralaya comes in, it's the same thing that has happened with man. The individual stops living physically, stops his manvantara of one life, and goes into his own pralaya, which is the time between incarnations. The universe does the same thing. Stops the physical part disappears, dies, between quotes, eventually it comes back to life, reincarnates again. In other words, the universe, like a human being, sort of dies, between quotes. Okay? Which means that the physical life of the universe comes to an end. Then comes a period of rest, a subjective period, in which he synthesizes what's been learned, of the same duration of the physical period. Very prolonged, millions of years. But eventually it comes back to life again. It sort of reincarnates again. So you have the universe functioning physically again. Same thing as a human being. That's what we do. We disincarnate, we go through a subjective period in the upper worlds, and eventually we come back into the physical one in a new incarnation again. The method is the same because the law is only one, and everything follows the same pattern. There's one thing that the Master Moria makes here very clear, and it is that all the processes of nature which are oriented to achieve something take time. The law of graduality is something inevitable, something we have to deal with. I say this because most of us in this world don't like to wait. Essentially and fundamentally, we want things to happen as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. We don't have the patience and we don't have the wisdom to learn to wait. If one achieves things, pushing things, in a sort of hasty way, what happens is that eventually whatever we have achieved will disappear or will be drastically modified. But when things are achieved very slowly, very gradually, they tend to remain and become part of the process. So therefore, it's very important to remember when we are, under the impression that we should go faster, that we should develop faster, and some people take instructions from some pseudo instructors who want to teach them developmental methods to achieve powers and that sort of thing. Well, it's not wise. It is something that we have to think twice, especially if the one trying to instruct us is asking for money, because the intention there is a commercial one, not to ennoble us, not to make us better, not to haste our development or anything of that sort. What he wants is our money. And he's not stopping at something that is completely unacceptable. Moving fast. The unfoldment of a human being takes time, many incarnations. Whatever is there to be achieved is about. Whatever is there to be achieved must be achieved slowly and gradually. Like that, we will be sure that it will essentially and fundamentally remain. This is an important thing to have into account. Along these lines, in response to Mrs. Sinet's fourth question concerning evolutionary cycles, the Master begins by saying, the evolution of the world cannot be considered apart from the evolution of everything created or having been in those worlds. He pointed out the fallacy of the ordinary idea of the creation of the world and described both planet and man as states for a given time. Using the analogy of an octave on the piano, he set the concept within the understanding of the ordinary person. Well, the thing is that everything everything functions under the same law, under one law, which is what he has told us before, essentially. And there are certain parameters which are the ones to be added in the particular case of the evolution of mankind. Above all, to consider the fact that, in fact, creation as such, in an absolute sense, is not something acceptable as an idea. Because that implies the idea of something being invented when there was from nothing, when there was nothingness before. That idea is very extra, very logic. We have to forget about those things. Things that don't make sense do not belong in theosophy. What we have is a re-establishment of something. When we say about the creation of the universe, it's better to say the manifestation of the universe. Replace the word creation, which, as I said before, implies something invented where there was nothing before. Replace it by manifestation, which means you are going back again into something that is the continuation of what we had before. Because one of the things we are told is that the universe is infinite. It has no beginning and it has no end. Most of the fundamental things, even in the manifestation, have no beginning and no end. And that idea, from an intellectual standpoint, is very difficult to conceive. But not to break our brains trying to understand something that is infinite. The human mind at its present stage of unfoldment cannot comprehend infinity. How can something exist without ever having had a beginning? It's something that we cannot deal with. There's plenty of this, and we will find in the study of occult science, in the study of theosophy, you will find many things that still do not represent an answer for us. Then we have to understand that the answers given to us, or whatever question may come into our mind, will be given to us when we are ready to understand them. There's no point in explaining us something that we can never begin to understand, because our intelligence, even the brightest you can find in this planet, is not yet ready to understand certain things. They're too abstruse, too complicated, too profound, too deep, and too subjective to be able to appeal to human intellect. It just doesn't work that way. So what we do is we work with what we have. That is essentially the thing. Another letter which should be recommended for special study is the so-called Devachan letter. Chronologically, it's letter 68. But as the letters are arranged in the book, it is number 16. It's talking about the Trevor Barker book, which organized the thing to make it more didactic. He organized it by themes, by subjects. It begins on page 99 in the second edition, and on the page 97 on the third edition. This should be followed by a study of letter 25, chronologically 105, beginning on page 191 in the second edition and on page 188 in the third edition. The Englishmen were not quite satisfied with the answers given in letter 16 and forwarded further questions to the Mahatma. Letter 25 contains the answers to those further questions. Unfortunately, in this second letter, the questions and answers are not so clearly separated. Some of the questions not being specifically numbered or identified are rather implied in the answers. Careful study, though, will clarify this difficulty. In the main, these two letters concern after-death states, and specifically that state of consciousness, not a place, called Devachan, in which the ego, talking about the spiritual ego, soul, reaps the happy fruit of all the good which has lived, felt, spoken, or done in the previous life. That is after he has disincarnated. No sorrow can enter the egoic consciousness in Devachan. It is a period of varying length of time, although time does not exist at that level of consciousness. There are no clocks, no timepieces in Devachan, says the master. For the harvest of bliss is compensatory for the good sown during the earth life, and this obviously varies with individuals. Sinet has suggested that there is a close resemblance between Devachan and the heaven of ordinary religion, omitting the ideas of an anthropomorphic God, of course. The Mahatma contradicted this and said there is no resemblance between them. However, the conclusion one draws at this point will probably deepen somewhat upon one's concept of heaven. Some aspects of Devachan, as described in these two letters, do seem similar to the usual idea of heaven. This is something to think about. The student may find it of interest to compare these descriptions with his or her own ideas concerning this phase of the afterlife. The cosmological notes and the letters on Devachan are perhaps the most technical in the book, although they are not by any means the only letters dealing with philosophical and metaphysical subjects. These appear here and there in connection with discussions of other matters. The quotations and comments cited here are mere samplings. Depending upon the seriousness with which this study is pursued, the question and answer letters are especially recommended for one who wishes to understand the Mahatma's views on these more abstruse subjects. The study of the Mahatma Letters can occupy a lifetime, and there should be no discouragement because of an apparent lack of progress. The teachings cannot be taken in one gulp or assimilated in one sitting. They are something to return to again and again through the years for increasing enlightenment, never-ending fascination, and an ever-growing conviction of their validity.